Hello.
Hi, how you doing?
Good. How are you?
I'm fine, thanks. Yeah, well, surprisingly. Yeah. Thanks for getting in touch with the Jupiter people. That was good.
It's all right. Oh, you did most of it.
Well, yeah, I think it's good to get that, momentum going really because.
Yeah, agree.
Yeah. Hi, Dennis. Hello.
Morning.
There's a chicken there.
Not here.
Oh, right. There was a chicken somewhere.
There was, yes, I heard it, but well, not mine.
In our garden.
Oh, Dennis's chicken.
Well, it's Jenny's rather than mine, but it's.
Joining the call.
Oh, yeah.
Hi.
Morning.
Sorry,
Hey.
I have to leave at 10:30. I've got students.
No problem. Good to see you. How have you been?
Good, yes, busy. Running address reviews for a paper. Everyone has their opinion on how you should write.
As we shall see.
Yeah, it's totally gone are the days when we used to get letters saying how wonderfully things were written.
Mm.
Things have changed. How's everyone else?
Yeah, okay, actually. Sort of looking forward to kids going back to school. Like, I'm not going to lie.
You know when they're going back, so we haven't been told which day yet.
I think it's Monday next week for us.
Okay.
So,
Is that
yeah.
primary?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, secondary schools are trying to work out how they're going to stagger them in.
I see. With all the testing and.
Yeah.
Mm.
So my daughter isn't looking forward to it, and neither of her friends. They just can't. They don't want to go and get tested lots.
No.
But also they can't think about wearing masks all day in lessons because it's going to make hearing and talking much harder, and it's just going to get sweaty and.
Also a source of rebellion amongst children as well. As you can see, I'm not wearing my mask, says the teacher.
The PE teachers,
right.
last term, didn't get it.
Well, the Scottish government's pulled off a spectacular piece of sleight of hand by putting one of the dates for a wave of people going back as the first day of the Easter holidays. So, but I think, I think it's quite mixed between how school will be a bit weird when it goes back, combined with the fact that people will be very pleased not to be attempting to study on the on the laptops and tablets, and will be able to see friends and so on.
I think the teaching has been so much better this term because the government said you have to do live teaching, and it's for secondary school anyway. That's been a complete turnaround from the first time where they went, we're not allowed to do anything. If we do live teaching, then you might sue us in some way. And so actually they were setting way too much work the first time because they were going, draw a poster of, not realizing that answer 5 questions takes the allotted hour. Draw a poster can take the entire weekend of agonizing. So that's been a lot better than last time. I think the difficulty is that they're going back to school, but they're still not allowed to meet in the garden even. But when they walk to school, she normally walks to school in a group of 4. So is she allowed to walk to school in her group of 4 who she'll spend all day at school in? Or like, do we go, no, you've got to walk in pairs?
Yeah, yes. Well, Scottish government hasn't had any similar mandate on of live teaching. I mean, there have been more materials provided this semester, or sorry, not semester, this term. But I think that's what the individual school has done. I'm not sure. I'm not totally sure what the rules are here. In terms of meeting the. I think certainly the way that the Scottish rules have been interpreted is that the younger kids can meet in
I think there was an exception for
small group.
primary school kids, wasn't it, in Scotland, but not in here. It's been, so this time it's been you can meet with one person. So she's been going for walks on a Saturday. My friend comes over, we go for a run, and she goes for a walk with her friend. But then we do let them play volleyball in the back garden. So because it's a big back garden, and
the SWAT team appearing.
yeah, exactly. They've just been for a walk with each other. I'm going to play volleyball outside.
Yeah, we started to have the odd thing like teenagers setting fire to a rubbish bin on the cycle path and things like that for because they're getting bored or something.
Oh.
So what's the plan today, Lisa?
Oh, okay. The plan is, so I've combined all the feedback. I appreciate now it's a very long document with a large number of comments. So it may or may not be helpful to see it all in one go. But the sort of most recent document on the Dropbox, just called combined feedback. There's a page of 4 bullet points of sort of general comments, and then I've just added sort of every comment that we received.
Great.
And the edits to the text are from Ben Ashby, who I think he came to one of the earlier calls, but hasn't been able to make more of them. But he was really helpful in sort of giving kind of finer edits on sort of how to phrase things. And then the comments, I've just put people's initials. In as much.
Great.
In most of the places.
So Ben's edits are him changing the text basically as a result of going through the comments, or just sort of tidying things up?
As a result of going through the comments. So basically,
it's much earlier.
Oh right. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So I just sent each reviewer their own copy. So they haven't seen each other's comments just because I thought that would get confusing.
Yeah.
And then I took Ben's one because it had the most changes on and added all the comments to it.
Perfect.
Yeah. So
Ben's are just suggestions for rework, well, mostly for wording, whereas the others are much more on content.
Okay.
Yeah. But that's helpful because we have sort of a mix of things. And I think Hannah has given another person who was hoping to make these meetings has given some of her comments about sort of finer things and wording things.
Hannah's, it's more of a mix.
Yeah, and then I think those who aren't sort of directly involved in I&I, so our ex-chief scientific advisors and such forth, have sort of given general overall comments.
HH Hannah then.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, maybe I should explain. So HH is Hans Hiesterbeck, who is the current epidemics, one of the authors, I believe, Valerie?
No, he was editor-in-chief of epidemics a while ago.
Oh, okay, sorry. Previous editor.
Yeah, it was his suggestion that we originally went to epidemics when for the 20.
And he was the editor of the last volume, as well as being editor-in-chief of the journal.
Well, he was the principal organizer of the
meeting, yeah.
of the 2013 meeting, because he was the one who suggested that we should have a meeting 20 years after the original epidemic models meeting, which he was a junior participant. That's the history. I think it's good. I think the combined document is very helpful. Thanks very much, Liz. I'm afraid I had an old friend died last week, and she's someone who needs commemorating, and lots of people telling and all sorts of things. So I've been a bit distracted. I've only read my way a third of the way through it, but and I suppose my overall comment would be that I think that quite a lot of the things they say, particularly Hanson, Graham, Medley, and Frank, I think didn't make quite so many comments, are very well worthwhile thinking about incorporating. And I've sort of done my nitpicking job on the introduction 10.1, 10.2. I didn't think you wanted any more comments added to the document. Already got too many people commenting, but so I think perhaps we should discuss some of these things, but I think we almost need a sort of little meeting where we perhaps delegate, 2 or at most 3 people to decide for each of the, well, it's 9 sections if you include the introduction and conclusions, as to how to incorporate these, these mostly very good comments. As I say, maybe I don't know, for this morning, perhaps I don't know whether what we could do jointly. Could we there are lots of tiny comments like Ben's suggestions of rewording, which I agree with most of, but not all. But I feel one person, possibly yourself, Lisa, since I think you're our style, you're setting the style for this, might just go through and decide on all those. And I think it might be helpful to have a slightly slimmed down version with just the important comments still there that we could consider.
I suppose, are there any sort of comments that people disagree with that they've looked through and
yes, I suppose I disagree with some.
Is it worth sort of pointing out on those, the sort of more contentious ones today, and then?
Yeah, so I was thinking.
I think it's often not as simple as disagreeing, Duncan. I think it's thinking we should clarify. That point. There'd be one where my response would be that was already covered, but perhaps it was covered in a slightly waffly way. One alternative is just to make clearer what we were saying in the first place, whereas others of them, I think, are changing the emphasis and adding important points.
Yeah. So I was going to propose that we discuss some of the sort of general comments, and if perhaps each person could look at their section, and if there's anything that you want to discuss, then we can do that as a group today. And then actually I had planned it, I was thinking exactly along the same lines as Dennis, in that we'll have to sort of split into sort of subgroups, because at the moment we've sort of got 8 or 9 different sections that definitely sound like they were written by 8 or 9 different people. And I think we need sort of subgroups to kind of make it all sound like one coherent document. So maybe we'll start with sort of general themes and anything anyone wants to discuss. I appreciate that you can't possibly read all the comments in one go.
Well, probably the most sort of substantive general comments come from Hans and Graham. So maybe it would be best to take some of theirs and think, there are a lot of good points, which we've sort of covered, but not perhaps as explicitly as they're making them, and think whether we want to incorporate them and how and where and those sort of things.
Yeah.
So, if you start on the general comments, I mean, the third one, Chris Dyes, is interesting. Much has been said about what should be done, much less about how.
Sorry, whose is that?
That's Chris Dyer,
On
again,
the first page of the
Very
document.
top page.
first page.
Right. Yeah. Okay.
So I'm not, which is sort of good point, but I'm not quite sure. Well, perhaps that could influence us in our rewriting, but I'm not sure it's. But and then the last one, I think of Hans is a very good point, but I think that should, as he says, that's really something to say maybe right at the beginning, or at least in the introduction. That the
Yeah, I felt
I
that.
kind of remember that transformation between modelers being a thing on the outside and modelers suddenly during BSE foot and mouth becoming more and more important. So I can see what he's saying there, but it's an introductory thing because now it's assumed, but would it be assumed in the future? Would they go back and go, actually modelling didn't help? Let's go back to the old ways.
well, I think
Yeah.
I think that question comes up in the text somewhere too, actually. So it's or maybe it says as another specific comment.
I think there's certainly another specific comment, and I can't quite think who made it now.
This
Might have been Graham on you know, how to make sure that things carry on in future in a sort of an integrated way, or you know, as well as we're doing now, but ideally better. I think it was Graham's, but I'm not sure.
So if we go on the introduction, the first paragraph seems to have had a number of minor changes, but particularly removed the sort of mention of the UK specifically, which I think is good.
Actually, there were conflicting comments on that. So unhelpfully, Hans received a slightly different version to everybody else in that I'd added in a paragraph about sort of linking back to the 2015 paper, mostly because we didn't get around to doing that when sending to everybody else. And I also just happened to see that I thought the word UK would fit in well on that first line. So I added the word UK, but it seems that Hans doesn't think we should add that. Whereas the people that received the version without the word UK thought that we should include it. So we have conflicting opinions there.
And I suppose there's, you know, it's not just the UK either. It's England and Scotland, and Northern Ireland and Wales and the UK.
Is he,
So-
you know, the only non-UK reviewer? Because Dutch, isn't he? He's very, they've got very strong established modelling.
Was it Germany?
Netherlands.
No, right, sorry.
He talks about the Netherlands.
Yeah.
Some later
I mean, I think the broad point is that I'm sure the paper is rather heavily coloured by the UK experience, but in a way, it's something we should be trying to widen out where we can.
Yeah.
I felt that in retrospect, perhaps, you know, that was one of the paragraphs, as it's the first paragraph of the paper, that is one where we should try and set a more general scene than this rather narrow. I mean, this is very much where we came at it from, of course, which is sort of, it's why it's there, and it's natural for us, you know, all the stuff about following the science and so on, but it is a very UK perspective, and other people might well not even particularly be familiar with politicians saying that and ramming it down your throat.
Well, I thought Hans's comments, you know, from the Netherlands point of view were interesting, because I mean he was actually bringing up something which I suspect is echoed here, so suggesting it is general. But I think wherever we make a substantive point about, you know, as it were, the way things are, the way things have been being done during this pandemic, we should try and be conscious of whether we're really just speaking of something that happened in the UK or wider. And if it's something that's just happened in the UK, we should at least think whether there's anything worthwhile we can say about how other countries did it differently. I was going to then, my I'm happy with the first paragraph as it now is, but others may not be. But I think Hans's substantial point that his introductory thing about how the involvement of modelers is really quite a novelty, and something I imagine welcome. So I think something making Hans's point should be inserted after that first paragraph myself, and I think that would be not too difficult to do, and I think it would sort of fit in with the flow.
Yeah, because I suppose we're going from the sort of basis that there has been lots of scientific, prominence in the way that and modelling, but as Hans says, that's not automatic, and we're sort of thinking about how it can be improved from where we are, rather than from zero to having models.
Yeah, so I mean, I think so the I think what we should be trying to get over is that it's by no means worked out perfectly, but it is a big improvement on what went before. We should be trying to part of the point of the paper is, and the volume as a whole, is to try and build on that and carry on only better in the same sort of direction for future pandemics. The second para as it stands, which is the one with rather sort of bullet point sort of, I think the bit that two bits got criticised. One was the one about with the phrase ending ideologies, which I think some reference to different political attitudes or something. I think that's just a question of changing wording there, and then and I think the last two bits might get the best outcome is nothing happens, and the coping with uncertainty might get run into the wicked problem thing, and perhaps in answer to someone's question, I think Ben Ashby referred to that as too vague. We should the answer that I think is to add add to the wicked problem, try and summarize in a short phrase or sentence some of the sort of thinking behind the wicked problem paper, which are basically that COVID-19 is on various borderlines, which make it just happens to be disease is on various borderlines of action or which make political decision making particularly difficult.
I think that you could probably take a couple of sentences from Bernard's original. He wrote that page that we had a discussion about, didn't he? And I think that a couple of sentences from there about that would probably.
But otherwise, I thought that second paragraph should be, if anything, shortened, because some of the sort of issues like the international thinking and so on, we actually come back to another page or two further down the introduction. So
I'd be inclined to, rather than having those as sort of displayed bullet points, they could, or the ones we choose to keep, could perfectly well be in a list, in the sentence with a colon and then some items.
One or two sentences, absolutely.
Separated by semicolons, and then just, make the point that these are the sort of issues that we're going to bring out later in the paper. So it's just part of a brief introduction to what's going to follow.
Yeah. Agreed.
So going back to Hans's wider point about the fact that modelling is, I guess the use of modelling is fairly new. Do we think that's something that we can address in the introduction, and then it's probably okay? I don't think.
He's written quite a bit of it for us. I think if you take what he's written, then you can redraft and turn that his sort of trail through the diseases.
I mean, I think we want to keep it at the length it's at. It's so long. I mean, it's good stuff. I mean, it's so long it would perhaps go better with a sentence here and referring to it, putting it in later on. the alternative is to try and get the gist of it down into 2 or 3 sentences for here, I think.
Hmm.
Otherwise, it's a bit.
Oh yeah, no, definitely.
So I think we should try and get 2 or 3 sentences giving the thrust of what he's saying in there as a little paragraph. And if we want to keep more of it, then I think we should find a home for it in one of the later sections.
Yeah.
Yep. Good idea. And perhaps those of us on the other sections can just be mindful that we're not speaking as if modelling has always been used. But I think we don't really cover that, so I think that's okay.
Then Ben,
sorry.
Then there's the power that believes that these difficulties are severe, is clear, etc. Ben was criticizing us for vagueness there. I thought the answer to the vagueness is possibly to, within brackets, after pandemics and near pandemics, a few of the examples, just to indicate what we're talking about. I mean, I think he gives a list of some of the things we could refer to. The reference there, the Weiss and Maclean, I checked out. I thought possibly it'd be better to refer to that whole Royal Society volume as the reference.
Okay.
It's so, you know, what can we learn from SARS or something was the actual, you know, type, more or less the title of that Royal Society meeting.
Okay. Yeah, that was all I could find. But
I agree that particular bit is possibly the most cogent part of that. You could always give reference to both, but I thought referring to the whole volume,
okay.
I think would be. The assessments made by WHO, I think the reference you want there is to the, what's it called, the WHO's Global Health Assessment. It's either 2018 or 2019. I think I could.
Yeah, I couldn't find it. I couldn't remember the exact name.
It crossed my electronic searches again a few days ago. I'll try, so I should be able to recover it. I'll try and.
Okay, thanks.
I'll try.
Yeah, I was aware I probably hadn't added in the reference you wanted there.
Yeah,
I'll just put in the closest thing.
I mean, the great thing about it really is the headline thing was essentially saying that the US and the UK were the 2 best prepared countries in the world, and I think, you know, that indicates immediately there's something we've got to learn from.
Yeah.
Well, the assessment wasn't very good.
Well,
I better go. Sorry.
Okay.
Are you going to be here for hours? We're teaching till 11:30. I can see if you're still here.
Well, we're going.
No, we should finish.
Yeah, I hope you'll finish by then. Yeah, Lisa, let me know if you want me to work.
Plan for carrying on editing forwards.
Yeah.
I hope you'll be involved in your sections that most interest you.
Yeah, I'll just send you an email after.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Thanks.
Sorry.
Bye, Karen.
Okay, let's try to stick to the sort of general broader points or anything that we strongly want to discuss. Have we covered all the general comments at the beginning? By the way, there was an awful lot of positive feedback, but I didn't write it in because it was quite crowded. But every email that came back with a sort of comment that it was really interesting and sort of interesting ideas and things. So we have certainly making good progress.
There's Hans's there's Graham Medley's comment about sort of what is the real world, which I thought
I was just looking at that one.
quite interesting.
Which page?
It's down at the bottom of the first page. I think it's your last thing that you've pasted in on that.
I think that there is a wider issue. Oh yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
That's a good point.
not quite sure what we would want to say about that. I mean, it doesn't immediately fit with, well, I mean, it fits, but it doesn't, it's not part of what we're already saying, I guess.
Yeah.
That would be a new point too.
Yeah, probably the point
Yeah.
at which Graham thought of it, I expect.
Yeah, I think on that it's I mean one could go into all sorts of sort of semi-practical, semi-philosophical discourse on the topic, but I think an important point that's often missed is that people simply need to have thought about this, because quite often in one way or another this point about what is the relationship between the model outputs and the world just hasn't really been seriously thought of in what are supposed to be applied studies. And I mean, variously that's simply it just being not really with anything stated overtly, implicitly assumed that that modelling is relevant outside model world. I mean, one of my favourite bugbears from the energy world is people saying that they're modelling for insights, not for prediction, and then don't say what they mean by an insight.
I was going to suggest here that this is the bottom of, is it page 2? The last 3 lines, beginning of a paragraph there. In fact, the very last line of page 2, about where it says, whereas an integrated approach may make the overall impact of political decisions clearer. I thought I'd rather say whereas an integrated approach should enable better political decisions, and then one could put in a point sort of echoing Graham about the various different ways of looking at the real world, which ought to be taken into account in saying what is a better decision.
So, I mean, you can link a whole lot of, as you know, Chris was saying, the sort of social science in there, you know, social construction reality. So basically, you know, it's socially constructed rather than just a rational system. So you can go off into that sort of social science side of things. But
I mean, I think it's sort of, yeah. I mean, I think that could probably be summed up by just sort of saying that, you know, a better political decision is going to be one that takes a balance of health, social, and economic.
Yeah, but that's not the job of us modelers, I suppose, and that's the point. That's where politicians come involved to make those trade-offs, essentially.
Yeah,
but at the moment, anyway. Yeah.
But we're trying to, yeah. But modelers should be trying to, if possible, present integrated scientific basis for all those aspects. I mean, if you're taking it on in terms of health, social, and economic factors, then scientists, I would argue, can help with all 3 of those. The decision at the end of the day is going to be for the politicians, but I think the underlying point behind Graham's comment is that either side can have a sort of narrow perspective. And I think that if you compartmentalize the science, so you give separate advice on the epidemic aspects and on the economic aspects, say, then that makes it more likely that the politicians will play fast and loose in not really balancing those 2 things properly. So, but I think that, I don't know. I'll I could try and write a sentence or so, but I mean, Does anyone think either we should take no account of Graham's comment or that we should take longer account of it?
I think we should take account of it somewhere, but I'm not totally sure where. It's, I mean, in some way, it fits with the stuff on communication, doesn't it? Between
No, that's a nice idea.
groups,
Mm.
because we're coming from different perspectives, and so this, I think, I can't quite remember where we have that, but somewhere we've got something about communication between between policymakers and modelers and so on, and somewhere in there it might fit.
Yeah.
Yeah, nice idea. Yeah, I can bring that into 10 point,
Yeah.
well, whatever it is now, 10.4.
But I think
It's Peter. Hi.
Hello.
Are
Sorry.
you feeling better?
Yes, pretty much recovered.
We're looking at the most recent document called Combined Feedback, where I've just added every comment we received. So it's a rather hefty document.
Okay, I shall find that and have a look at it.
and we're trying to stick to the major comments.
Yes.
We've got to the bottom of page 2. So would people agree that we should that we should change the phrase about make the overall impact of political decisions clearer? Because
Where's that? Sorry.
it's the very last line of page 2.
Or the beginning of page 3, depending on your.
Well, the word clearer is on. Oh, have people got it differently formatted? For me,
Yeah, okay, now it's fine.
clearer is at the top of page 3.
You're counting in your pages. I'm not quite sure, because we've got the page at the beginning, which Lisa put some general comments on, and depending on which sort of numbering I look at, I get different things as coming out as page 3 and so on.
Okay, right.
So
Well,
I'm not quite clear where you are at the moment, Dennis.
Oh, sorry. We're therefore at the bottom of page 1 of the actual paper, aren't we?
Well, I thought so, yes. Okay.
Yeah, I'm just reading it in Microsoft Word, and down the bottom it tells me I'm on page 2 of 14.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, and the sentence that last paragraph starts, we discuss the problems of long-term planning. Is that the paragraph you're looking at?
The one below that.
One after that, the next decisions on policy.
Okay. Yeah, that's the top of the next page for me.
And I suppose this is a kind of, big question in terms of should we, and it was interesting that Juniper meeting was basically, the epidemiological model is pure and it shouldn't be kind of polluted, I think, with economic models, etc., to make the sort of holistic model. And I'm not sure what our view is on that. So sort of to keep the kind of scientific advice scientific, if you like, or natural science type modeling, rather than including trickier, well, less easily modeled social, political, economic type approaches. Whether that is the job for,
I
advice.
think it's a role for both, personally. I mean, the trouble is, the bigger you make the models, the more and more assumptions you put in, and the more
Yes.
things that you've got to make explicit.
Exactly, and
So it's easy to have a nice, small, tight
Yeah.
scientific thing that you really understand. On the other hand, I think it's useful to try and roll things together sometimes and try and see how they fit and what the trade-offs are.
And I suppose it's really who gets control of the model, if you like. The combined model can make it do whatever you want, really, in terms of how much you value a life, for example.
But when I think that's, I think our point is that there's a role for scientific advice in that integration. So the scientists ought to consider the integration, and we've come. We're saying several times throughout the volume that you can't have a single model. So you can imagine that you have various fairly complicated models that just deal with the epidemiology, but then and if you want to bring the economics in, you probably have to simplify those a bit. But then the balance is that you hope to be talking about an integrated model, which is fairly simple from the epidemiological point of view, but integrates the economics. And obviously, what your SPI-M people should be doing is trying to be reasonably confident, at least, that this integrated model does respect the more detailed epidemiological models, at least for the situation you find yourself in. So, so I think the integration is worthwhile.
Yeah, I agree, but sometimes I think you don't have to make it a single integrated model. You can chain models. So as long as there's no feedback, you can just chain them, and then you can try different economic models with different epidemiological models and see the interaction, which I think is very powerful. It's done a lot in climate.
Oh, sure, but that's a sort of methodological point, isn't it, Peter? I mean,
Well, I think
philosophically, you could say that either way you're integrating the two.
yes,
Whether
you're
integrating the two means writing down one model including both, or whether it means feeding one into the other and trying things out.
Yeah, no, I think it was the question about purity. But you preserve the purity if you chain them. You don't preserve the purity if you build a big model.
But surely
ownership.
Purity, but purity isn't what's important here. It's getting the uncertainties incorporated in the right way that's important, isn't it? So that
absolutely. But I think a lot of modelers, from my experience with climate, not with epidemiology so much, they value their purity quite highly.
Yeah.
And I think that's a social thing among scientists, not a policy thing, but it's a problem that has to be overcome. That they don't want their nice clean epidemiology model, climate model messed up with this nasty economics, which is something I just don't agree with. But from their point of view, they see it, I don't know, cheapening their model in some sense, which is stupid. And getting around that, I think, might be that methodology is a way around it rather than.
No, that's a.
But I agree with you. An integrated model can have lots of ways of looking at it, and in a sense, for policy, it doesn't matter where it comes from.
No.
Yeah, nice idea.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose what I quarrel, but sorry, the two things I'm trying to do here. One is to rewrite this sentence, and the other is to make find a home for Graham's point. I want to rewrite the sentence because I think it's the way it's written at the moment. It sounds as though the political decisions get taken first, and then we use an integrated approach to explain what's going on afterwards, which I really don't think is what we're trying to do. Which is why I wanted to change the last bit of the sentence to say should enable better political decisions, to make it clear that what we're hoping is that an integrated approach will feed into the people taking those decisions. Is that okay? And then I'm just suggesting that even if we deal with it later on, perhaps under communications, I think was suggested, maybe a reference to what Graham's talking about would be appropriate here. And I think that means that the you could follow up the integrated approach makes better political decisions possible with some remark that if you like, this is because good political decisions should properly weigh up various different ways of looking at, well, I'd say, using Graham's terms, of looking at reality, health, social, economic. Perhaps something like that. Possibly a reference forward to section 10 point something else, if that's where it's covered more.
Yeah, that sounds fine. I think I'd agree with Valerie in that we should donate Graham's comment to the communication section.
we finished that paragraph?
Yeah, I think so.
Then the
So the next one was, I think Graham is right that we've been slightly, because of the writing by committee, I think, we've slightly ambivalent about whether we think it's good to have lots of models or whether we want one perfect model.
I was going to suggest that that in both, sorry, two things in this paragraph should have some cross references to other papers. The key policy challenge is the need to communicate uncertainty should surely cross refer to chapter 7, the estimation, and the UQ paper, if that comes to happen. And then the bit about the range of models should cross refer to paper 6, shouldn't it? Because I'm
yeah, sounds right.
So
I hope somebody's making notes on all this.
I haven't been, but I can.
Well, we have got the recording. If we forget, I guess we can go
There
back.
is always a recording.
I'll try and Lisa, I'll try and salvage the bits that seem most relevant from my handwritten notes and email them to you. But do take your own, especially if they take into account new comments here.
Yeah. So
on the cross, just while I'm on cross references, the surveillance stuff I thought should be cross referring to both chapter 1, paper 1, and paper 8, the data paper. Somewhere down for what is for me the bottom of this page, there's a paragraph that begins more generally data are needed for model input. I'm sure that's that should be cross referring to paper 8.
Yeah, okay. And that would to some extent maybe deal with Ben's points about more information. But we do need to expand that slightly. That paragraph.
So if we're happy with the introduction, just make a point. Is there anywhere where we feel we need more comments? Because I know Chris felt we needed more on 10.7.
Yeah, it was more simply that I wasn't sure whether to interpret lack of comments as being an expression of gloriousness on the part of all of the reviewers, possibility that reviewers didn't all feel it was quite their thing, or the fact that they ran out of momentum a little bit towards the end of the paper.
Lack of stamina or time getting to the
but I think some sort of
in my own case, that's certainly it, I'm afraid, because I hope to get to 10.7 at some point.
Yeah, but I think from one of them, I think it would be good if there are any of them who we think have particular view, who we think have particular interest in that, then I'd certainly appreciate it if it's possible to get some specific comments. I mean, I think the only one I particularly remember was a comment saying it was a good point to mention code quality, which is a little bit of a discrete point within that section.
Yeah. So Chris Dye has a comment at the beginning of your section. So I can go back to him and see if he has any more thoughts on that. He was keen for us to include more sort of solutions and strategies forward. So I imagine he would be keen to also think about implementing change, because that is the same kind of idea. So yeah, I can just send an email and see if he has any sort of further thoughts on that. And also we'll be talking to Frank in a few days he was going to expand on some of his comments, so I can ask then as well.
That would be very good if we could ask Frank, because he's certainly someone from experience in DFT and all kinds of other things who's been involved in that. Frank's actually currently Frank's actually currently the sort of part of the group that's advising the government on a topic where I and some colleagues from Edinburgh are advising National Grid. So we're
if you know him, if you know him, feel free to ask him. But I'll also bring it when we speak.
I'll perhaps I can drop. I suppose it makes sense for me to drop him a note, because it may be easiest for him just to communicate, or at least in part to communicate directly with me on that section.
Excellent. Anywhere else where we felt we're lacking comments? I think we do have a good spread on the others. So I suspect, yes, people might have run out of steam and or time by the end. No? Okay. So perhaps if we could each take a look at our own sections, and if there's any sort of points that we think we need to discuss as a group that we're not too sure on.
I think there are a couple of points about SPI M and SPI B, which were seen as wrong, and I agree they're wrong. But I think it was really, I think I wrote it as lack of communication between those groups, whereas I think what I was trying to say was lack of behavioural modelling within the epidemic modelling. So I'll tone that down a lot.
Yeah, it's interesting to see other people read things in a completely different way to.
Yeah,
I didn't mean to say that.
And also maybe we need to take out those sort of references to SPI M and SPI B, because they're sort of UK centric and they're sort of have people attached to them. So maybe we need to sort of make it more general, I suppose.
Yeah,
I think that's a good point, and I think because we're using it almost between ourselves as a sort of shorthand. But this is the point I'm trying to make. And perhaps we need to make it a bit more carefully.
I think on that, given that, I mean, after all, this is a paper that's being written by people who are mostly or all UK based and originating from UK's National Institute, then I think having some UK emphasis, at least on examples, makes sense. But I think that's basically it. That we don't want it to be a paper about the UK, but we shouldn't be too concerned about using UK examples where they illustrate wider points.
I think that's exactly right. We want to make the wider point if we can, and then, for example, in the UK, blah blah blah.
And I think people like Chris Dyer and possibly Hans will be particularly helpful in, we might, if you don't think their comments have already covered it, and I haven't read all their comments, but you could actually ask them to comment on this aspect. I mean, are there important points we've missed out because we've been too UK centric, or alternatively, points we've either overemphasized or missed out by being too UK centric. I mean, there's an underlying suspicion. I'm not sure if it's correct that actually one of the reasons the UK's response had flaws is that it is such a huge sort of it's such a huge lot of machinery with so many people involved, with a sort of more and more good people involved. We can only do better, and that may actually could argue that sometimes it's the sort of too many too many cooks spoiling the broth sort of thing, isn't it?
They are all Michelin
maybe some smaller countries with
Yeah.
smaller numbers of advisors to call on have actually done better just because they've been able to cut through. And while that's obviously will have meant they've made mistakes, they may actually have been able to look at their own individual bigger pictures more clearly.
You sort of think that
I mean, if I think about the huge emphasis that's gone into every aspect of opening or closing schools, that has, tied down modelers who perhaps could have been thinking something more, more large scale. I think that's one of the.
And I suppose that gets into, another behavioural thing is that modelers will, I think we're all self-interested to a certain extent. And so some of the problems are
a fascinating problem, like what's going on with schools or universities, and
maybe the people who research them are correlated to whether or not they have children at school. So just as an aside, do you know what's happened to the Joint Biosecurity Centre? Because it wasn't mentioned at all in the roadmap and seems to have disappeared. Because that was sort of, if you like, the replacement of the modelling. It was sort of designed to be within government rather than outside government. It seems to have disappeared.
I know one of our Cambridge postdocs is doing a secondment there. And she's still there.
Restructuring. Right, okay, yes. Yeah.
They seem to have actually done a lot of modelling a lot more than you hear about sort of in the news.
Sure. So the example of too many cooks, I suppose, I would maybe sort of New Zealand is a good example. May not be, of course, I don't know, but sort of the Targo modelling and groups they had there kind of set the policy for New Zealand, and I suppose because it wasn't unsuccessful, they kind of carried on with it.
Yeah, I think with JBS, because I was peripherally, I didn't end up being relevant, but I was peripherally at one point associated with a discussion with JBS, and I think sometimes we might simply not hear about what they're up to because of their security role, and essentially where a different government lab or a different government unit might tell people what they're doing, JBS might be doing essentially the same thing and not tell people because they're JBS.
Which is interesting, isn't it? Because, the whole thing about the epidemic response is it was not secret.
Yeah, I certainly we came across a very strict NDA on something that we were under a very strict NDA for initial discussions on something which I've in a way that I've not encountered previously outside very occasional security relevant things.
Yeah, I suppose they're maybe answering different questions as well.
Yeah, I mean, usually what happens occasionally with government, you get asked. People always tell you this is confidential. Here we really mean it. But not something like that.
Any other sort of main points that come up?
So,
I think I'm happy with the comments on my section.
So why could I suggest, just trying to think ways that are helpful to Lisa to produce the next version of this. Could I suggest that we write any comments we wish, rather than writing further over the existing palimpsest, if we each write separate little documents, which we could, mine would be called comments DM, and similarly for others, but I was going to suggest the name should say comments DM, and then have the sections I'm commenting on that I've got substantial comments on. So I might put comments DM 2,3,5, meaning that these are comments on sections 2, 3, and 5.
And the other, I don't know what you think, but the other way of doing it is just to share the document where we can all track changes on it.
Yeah, I just feel there may be so many. Well, the trouble with that, Duncan, is I don't think we're ready to get rid of all the comments it's already interlaced with, which is about as many as I can be faced with. And also,
would it work if we each took our sections in small groups or whatever, and got rid of all the things that are pretty incontrovertible? You know, that
tidied up,
which I think could be done fairly easily. So that what we've got, so we've cleaned all that stuff out of the way, and we've got something which reads reasonably easily, but we've still got any main comments that are yet to be taken properly into account. I don't know whether that halfway stage, and then at that stage we could add these extra comments without them getting totally lost in all this. But I mean, when it comes to just bits of clarifying wording or whatever, I suspect we'd all agree pretty much.
Or I guess the other option is that we divide into sort of subgroups and take a few sections each, and between the 2 or 3 people, you can deal with the sort of larger comments, and anything you're not sure about, you can leave as a comment. I
mean, anything which we feel the whole group needs to take a view on, we can leave in. But I don't know about you, but I start to get mesmerized when I look at all this at the moment. I mean, and I know I can strip it all out, but then I haven't got it anymore.
Well, what about another way of doing it is if we had a lead person for each section, then there's those of us who want to comment a bit across the board. You know, I've got lots of comments I might be tempted to just put in, and or changes I might be tempted to do, and but I feel I don't want to do that without discussing with whoever's most responsible for that section. So I'm just trying to think of a way to.
Well, I think it comes in. There are some things that, as Valerie says, that we need to take a view on, and we can leave those in. But there's the tidying up stage before that, where
Well, the tidying up, I guess it could either be done all by Lisa to have a consistent style, or could be shared by different people doing different sections. So what's
yeah, happy with either.
Would it be better, easier for Lisa, maybe if we each did the separate sections first to get rid of the worst stuff,
trivial stuff,
and then let Lisa have something a little bit cleaner to read through and try and sort of smooth over the cracks and so on. But
the thing is, if we've got multiple editors on it, do we need it in sort of Google Docs or something, rather than if we just each look at it in our own version of Word, which is, I suppose, what I'm accustomed to doing, then we could easily end up with sort of conflicted copies if 2 of us are going through it at the same time or whatever.
We could also leave this document as it is and then look at each section separately. So just copy over the comments and sort of deal with them as. And
that would be the easiest way to just extract from this, and then we can read.
Because we know what it looks like as a whole. So
I
think it might be pull it apart and then put it back together again before the 31st.
Yeah, sounds good.
So shall we all work on our individual sections and send you the section, or is that the best way of doing it? Or
Yeah. Do we want to work on our individual sections in groups? So it's, I'm keen for the writing to be a bit more sort of consistent, and I don't know how best to ensure that, or maybe that's something we don't need to worry about.
So you'd really like us, rather than being one to a section, to be two or three sections?
Well, I'm very open to ideas, but I think that might be good, because I feel like we've been quite separate so far, and it's just sort of good to bring in other.
I mean, yeah. So does that come back to, if we could just, I mean, I don't have it, but perhaps others do. If we could just set down the lead, who is the individual, who is the lead person on each section. Okay, if we had a lead person on each section, including the introduction and conclusions, and then we could set a timeline, maybe next weekend, by which other people who wish to comment on a section should tell the lead person. So in other words, I can just, if Duncan's the lead person on section 3, I can email Duncan and say, here are my comments or suggestions on section 3, and then leave it to Duncan to incorporate those or leave them as track changes, for discussion or whatever as he sees fit. That way we'll get, I think that avoids, hopefully that minimizes tripping over people. Is that okay?
So
well, are you suggesting that you're going to provide, I mean, a lot of it will be, we've got a lot of discussants, a lot of comments from the people that have read it that we need to try and take into account. Are your comments on their comments, or are your comments additional comments, if you see what I mean?
Oh gosh, they might be either, really.
Yeah, so I mean,
I think what we're hoping is that, if take my example of Duncan and the fictitious section 5, whatever I called it, if he looks at it himself and anyone who wants to emails him during this week with their point of view, then hopefully he can give us a version of that section that that has got rid of things that everyone's agreed about, tidied up things that everyone seems agreed about, and just leaves the issues requiring group discussion, which can either be as comment changes in the margin or as italic bits in the text, whatever he finds easiest to do.
Any overriding preferences?
Really, to get rid of it's all wooden trees for me at the moment. I need to sort of clear some of it out. I mean, the issue with looking at it section by section is that if we would think about moving stuff, like the comment about philosophy of communication and whatever, we that needs to be done on a sort of more group level, but I don't mind.
Okay, so should we make step 1 clear up the document as much as we can, so that we have something readable, and then split into subgroups with lots of opportunity for people in different groups to contact the lead of each section?
I think as well we have. I mean, I think that's a very good idea in terms of how we actually deal with changes to individual groups. I mean, there's also the sort of the 2 overall editorial points. I'm not sure to what extent we want to aim for any real common writing style, and that will probably require a single person to go through all of it and do final and do major edit for language, not content. But the other part of that is just making sure is someone having an overall view of whether sections are consistent with each other, or whether there's appropriate referencing between sections, whether we cover something twice in different sections without really linking those together.
And references to the other papers in the volume.
Yeah. Those are possibly something which needs a sort of those may be something which needs a particular individual to just take a look over it and to make suggestions to the relevant section leads.
A very obvious thing, just sort of moving my cursor across this at speed, is the well, we keep mentioning it, but the different styles of the different sections in terms of, you know, headings and bold bits and so on. So you know, if you look at 10.2, it's nicely done in paragraphs with a sort of bold start to each paragraph, and then sort of 10.3 is just a single sort of, you know, the heading and then what goes underneath. Then when we're back at 10.4, we're back in lots of bold bits and so on. And that goes on the next few. I mean, can we take a decision on that? Because I think that is something that would help to integrate the whole thing, to decide, you know, how are we trying to bring out the actual challenges?
Yeah.
Sorry, I know it's a difficult one, but we've been dodging around it for months probably. But at some point,
a decision has to be made. Yes, exactly.
Yeah, I came to the conclusion that different sections suited different styles, which is not the conclusion that we should come to.
No, I agree with you. I've had that feeling too. You know, the ones that are done, you think, oh, this works really well. And then you look at the next one and you think, oh, I don't know how I'm going to do that. But I think we do have to try and find some middle ground that works for all of them.
Should we just arbitrarily pick one style?
So as I see, there are three styles. One is
I should just say I'm going to have to leave for another meeting now, so please try not to place too many actions on me by email arising from the last 15 minutes.
Okay.
Great.
Thanks, bye.
Bye.
Thanks, Chris.
So as I see it, we've got bold question and then a paragraph, and then we've got paragraphs with bold bits in them, and then we've just got text with no highlighting at all. So yeah, what do people think?
I think it's helpful to have some bold font because some of the sections are rather long.
Okay. So the question then is it make the point with and then follow it up with a paragraph, or is it paragraph with highlighted text?
I suspect the former may be easier in terms of sort of integrating the three styles. It's because it's a sort of middle ground, isn't it? So that you've got a little sort of subheading to each paragraph or to groups of paragraphs, but I don't know.
So we're thinking the style of 10.2. So the first sentence is sort of a mini topic title in bold font.
Yeah, I think the just there's another point is, are we asking questions or are we answering questions? So these are all framed as questions.
I suppose it's supposed to be challenges. They should be questions. That's
okay.
But well, but then.
Yes, I'm looking at 10.2. They're not all questions, are they? The first three are questions, but the last two are more statements.
Dennis, did you say there should be questions or there shouldn't be questions?
No, I think we should be raising questions. I mean, maybe if they don't have to be phrased as questions, it can be a topic, and then you could.
Yeah.
I do think it's difficult actually, but.
So maybe whatever feels natural for now.
Yeah, I mean,
I don't think it has to be. I mean, it might be a bit overwhelming trying to force everything into a question.
Yeah.
And I suspect having a mix, because there's going to be quite a lot. Having a mix is probably fine.
I think. I mean,
But-
yeah.
And it sort of highlights where we have a view of some things and some things we don't, and
I think it would look quite good if we had, if we encourage, let's say, paragraphs to begin with a sort of heading as in bold at the beginning, like in 10.2. But obviously, when you have a but that could well run on into several paragraphs which don't need a heading, So you could have 10 paragraphs of which 3 or 4 started with a bold, new topic sort of thing. And I think then, provided it's done reasonably sparingly, I think to also have phrases highlighted in the middle of paragraphs where that seems a more appropriate way of emphasizing a point should also be allowed. I would suggest that where one does that, one should try and keep it shorter rather than, not have too many and try and keep them fairly short. I noted 1 or 2 that seemed to be almost a whole sentence, and then another thing in bold. That sort of begins to look fussy. So if it can be written so that there's a sort of key idea which is presented in the middle of a sentence, is just 5 at most 10 words in bold. But so I suppose I think I'm agreeing with what seemed to me to be coming across in conversation, which is that we try and move in a direction of having something a rather more similar approach, but doesn't not slavishly the same. Yeah. I think it could be a question for the final rewriting. If there's the final rewriting, as Chris suggested, I think, in the final rewriting, whoever does that might say, well, actually, I think I could make these all more consistent if I did it in this particular way. But if we just, so perhaps what I'm suggesting is the intermediate step, but I think that might be the next thing. Thinking we're nearly done. So Lisa, what I would like is a definitive list of who is the lead person on each section, so that if I'm, and second, and I will.
So you wrote the introduction, so you'll be the lead on the introduction.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. I think it just makes sense to go for who wrote it.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Valerie, do you want to take the lead on 1? As
Yeah,
Dan
I
took
can
the lead
do
on
that. I
2?
did a lot of 1.
2 is Kerry Ann, 3 is Duncan. Yeah, I think with the new numbering.
That's the integration.
Yeah.
4 and 5.
Who did communication?
I've taken the names out. Sorry. I did 4 and 5.
You're 4 and 5. Okay.
Peter did 6. Did he not?
Peter and Ben did 6.
Yeah, I'll take, since I'm here. I'll take responsibility for it, but I'll get in touch with Ben.
We'll label Peter as the lead, and he can liaise.
Yeah. I've seen Ben later in the week, so that's fine.
10.7.
Chris did 7.
Chris did 7, and then we have the conclusion, which we haven't really written yet.
Who do you want on that? I mean, I'll volunteer if no one else will.
And I think when we're redoing our sections, we could all be alert for odd things that might want to be picked up.
Yeah, and could I? So, are we going to put things into? Are the lead people going to each of them edit their section at some point, or are we going to do these separately and send them to Lisa to integrate? Say.
Yeah, so maybe for Tuesday, we make the first step, making it a bit less cluttered. So take your section, deal with any comments that you can deal with immediately, leave in anything you want, maybe try to go for that style that we talked about in 10.2. And then you can either do it on the document or make a new document and put it on the Dropbox or send it to me or any of the above.
Yeah.
So
And
do you
then, yeah.
we need to do that by a certain time? By Monday or by Friday?
Monday lunchtime?
Oh, brilliant.
And then I guess from Tuesday we can do the sort of subgroup idea and
Mhm.
a bit more collective editing. Would that be a good strategy forward?
Yeah.
Then we have fewer
Yeah.
comments to deal with.
Yeah, well, then we can really focus on the few that are left that
Yeah.
are more sort of substantive. That's good.
Yeah, maybe actually
Yeah.
if we leave the combined document as it is,
Yeah, let's not
Yeah.
touch this version.
so either duplicate it and do your own sections or copy it over however you wish. Yeah.
I think we either do it as. I think I'd like a uniform approach. We either each do separately and present a new version of our sections, so as separate little documents, or we edit the thing, in which case it's going to go through quite a lot of editing with each case with somebody adding their initials at the end, and it's going to get a bit. I don't mind that, but which do you prefer?
Let's go for each section a separate document.
Yeah, I think that's
So
probably
we
better.
extract out the
Yeah.
section from this document and then work on it.
Yeah.
And then at some point,
And if we could try to, would Monday lunchtime be okay if you? I was going to say, if we each try and get our separate documents done by Monday lunchtime,
Yep.
Right.
then Lisa can, if she
Yeah.
wants to, put them all together in a new single document.
Yeah, I can do that.
So Lisa, feel free to take out that thing in the introduction the Graham Medley comment about what you said, put it in communication, is that right?
Yes, I'll move that now. Should I? Do I need to go through and accept the sort of Ben's?
I think
don't worry about that. Whoever's doing the sections
Yeah.
can go through and do all those bits and pieces.
Brilliant.
Excellent. Okay,
Okay. Well,
Good.
we're getting there.
Getting there.
Alright.
And just another thing about the Juniper meeting. Should we talk about it, Lisa, or is it not?
Yeah.
Yeah. So there was, I don't know if anybody turned up was on that.
I heard most of it, yeah.
Yeah, but there was the sort of so it seems as though that's obviously looking at epidemiological modelling. It's really whether part of that could be looking at what has come out of this paper and to think about including that within some of the Juniper work. So that was really a thought. I mean, there were comments about visualization that came up in there. There were comments about economic modelling integration which came up, but there's also the sort of work that we've done, and really it's whether there's space within Juniper for, if you like, the more of this stuff that isn't purely the models. So that's a sort of a thought that came up, and Lisa and I have been kind of thinking.
How would you take that forward?
Well, I suppose it's I don't know. Do you have any thoughts, Lisa, about that?
Well, this is This is the main kind of topic that I'm thinking about in my PhD as a whole, which is why leading on the policy paper was a sort of useful avenue. Most of what we've done so far has been actually more on the sort of WHO imperial interface, rather than in this paper we're looking more at sort of UK policy and modelers. But a lot of thinking about the same questions of how do we do things better? How do we ensure that what we're saying is understood in the right way? Many of the topics of this paper will be sort of future things that I'll be looking into. The approach we're taking with my PhD has become sort of a lot less quantitative and a lot more qualitative. So it's requiring me to learn a lot of sort of, I guess, social science and political science. So at the moment, it's just a huge learning curve. But I think in the sort of Juniper sense, I don't know at what point is the best time to start asking these questions, whether it's a case of right now they just need to do what they need to do, and it might not be possible until the work kind of dies down a bit to think about how we can do it better. But I think where Duncan has got to so far is we're seeing if Juniper are interested in sort of talking about this initially, if we could have a sort of initial discussion. It might be that they don't have the capacity to change how they're doing things at the moment, which would be perfectly understandable.
But it's sorry, I've forgotten that email correspondence. So it's with them to react in some way, is it? To your thoughts.
Moment, yeah. And I suppose, as Lisa says, everyone's very busy at the moment.
I wonder why.
Yeah. But I think it's really saying that people can have a really brilliant epidemiological model, but if it doesn't get implemented or seen through, then it's not that useful. So all the sort of things we've been talking about here. So it's it is, I suppose, more of the social science rather than the hard modelling. And it was interesting at the Juniper discussion when Flavio, the economist, came on. My sense was it was resisted a bit because it's kind of keeping the as Dennis was saying, keeping the epidemiological models pure. But there is this next stage of implementing what comes out of that and expressing it and communicating it, and visualizing it, all that stuff that that perhaps is interesting and useful. But as I say, we're not really sure where Juniper are with that at the moment.
Well, perhaps when this paper is finished, that'd be a good point because then you've got something which
exactly
you give people to read and think about.
Maybe in one of sort of later discussions this month, we can think about who is interested in kind of taking these ideas forwards and who's happy to put it to bed. Who's had enough?
Chapter in your life you'd like to close
on. I guess so. We've asked Kira. Okay. We've asked Kira if we're invited to a meeting they were talking about. That was unclear in the email chain. They might have some sort of further discussions on visualization. Some of us would be keen to sort of sit in on that. And yes, I guess we're just waiting to see when's the best time for them to respond, or when's the best time to meet. It could be a longer term thing.
I'm sorry, I'm gonna have to disappear now, but I think we've pretty much finished, haven't we?
I think
so. Do some homework before next Monday.
Thank you. See you all next week.
Bye bye.
Bye.